What's going on, people? Dom C from the Project Prospect here with Tigo, my cohort, for another episode of the Draft Dodgers. We're going to change it up a little bit. We're going to get away from the mock draft realm because there's going to be plenty of in-depth mock drafts to come in further episodes. But we thought it now would be a perfect time as we get into kind of the tail end of the college season to really start taking a little bit of a deeper look at the positional groups as a whole. So we're going to start right away. Let me first say, Tigo, how you doing today, man?
Doing very good. I'm very, very good. I'm really excited to start taking a deep dive into these prospects and not just in a mock draft area, where we just like, hey, here's team, here's good fit, but like, hey, let's take a little bit of a deeper dive on some of these top prospects so that we can start building up a knowledge base, so that we can start finding out what players are going to fit with what teams and things like that.
Yeah. And let me preface by saying, full disclosure, the guys that we talk about today are guys that we like, as a whole, and more so as a whole as of today, fully understand that these lists and these orders and the order that these guys go, or some of them might stay, some of them might drop, but it's still kind of early into the draft cycle. But it's time to start putting names and faces and little check marks next to the guys that are going to hear their name called at some point in April, probably early. So, we're going to start out today. We're going to start nice and easy with what I think is probably the strongest, if not one of the strongest positional groups in this 2024 draft, and that's wide receivers. Man, I don't know about you, Tigo. I mean, it was so hard to kind of pick or come up or formulate a top 10 out of this group because, I could have easily reeled off 20 to 25 names that I thought were, could have been talked about today. What do you think about the wide receiver group as a whole so far?
I love this class so much. So when I go through my process, I tend to go tiers, right? What are the tiers of players, right? And you go tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. And then from those tiers, I try to come up with, because I think that's a better way to look at classes. And then you said, okay, let's come up with a top 10. And I was like, okay, cool. My first 3 tiers were really easy. And then tier 4 had like 10 guys in it on its own. And then you're just like, I like all of these guys. They're not all first rounders.
Yeah.
And so how do I differentiate? Because you're not going to have 15 wide receivers go in the first round.
Yeah.
And the reality is like this class you're going to get high upside wide receiver 2s in the second and in the third round. It's just insane how good this class is. And I was going through my list and I was like, okay, here's number 1, here's number 2, here's number 3, here's number 4, and here's number 5. So I was like, I'm at number 6. And I was like, how is this guy still not on the list?
Yeah.
This guy's what's happening here? And then you keep going. You're like, oh my God, I forgot about this guy. How is he not on the list? But who am I going to take off of the list for this guy? It was such a I sat there and I racked my brain and I just had to come up with there's no objective way to get this right. So I went, what do the Jets need? And that's my top 10.
Well, and you know what's funny is that, like right now, I mean, I don't have true grades on guys yet, and I won't have that for a while. I've watched a lot of film so far on these guys, whether this year and last year's film. And I got eight names that can justifiably, wouldn't surprise 8 or 9 names that wouldn't surprise me if they were first round picks. Now, I don't think there's going to be 9 first round wide receivers, but there's guys on this list that didn't make my top 10 that if they made the first round, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever. So before we get into your top 10 versus my top 10, I think it's suffice to say that the world as we know it in NFL, in college football, in Draftville knows who the best wide receiver in the country so far is. So I don't think there's any argument there, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State.
Yep, absolutely. It's not even a question.
So I'll let you have the honors and talk about Marvin Harrison a little bit.
I think the easiest thing to talk about with Marvin Harrison, give me 1 second, is that he is a true superstar X wide receiver. Like, I hate when you go through the draft prospect every year, the draft process, I'm sorry, every year, and somebody finds a prospect that they like a lot that just kind of elevated themselves amongst the rest of their peers, and then they get slapped with a generational tag.
Yeah.
In my years of evaluating talent, I have yet to have a player that I've given a generational tag to. This year, without a doubt, Marvin Harrison Jr. is a generational type of prospect. You very rarely hear me say that that's an NFL player playing in college, and that's what you have with Marvin Harrison Jr. There's not a single thing that he does bad. Everything that he does goes from either good, great, or just the best. And that's the craziest part about it. He's got super soft hands. He's huge, 6'4", 205 pounds. He's not that old. I think he's 22 years old, which is just insane. Crisp route running, great after the catch. He's good in run blocking. He can play the X, and he's quick enough to get out of press and to elevate that way. He has great body control. We could talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. for an hour, literally just on him, because he is truly, truly the best prospect I have ever evaluated, period.
Wow, that's a bold statement right there.
Like, I just think he is. And
it-
I don't know if I will grade a player as highly as Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah.
anytime soon.
I'll say this about Marvin Harrison. Two things. One, I love, like, he just plays football very effortlessly. Like, it looks like he's not, he's a smooth strider. Nothing is herky jerky. Everything is with intent and content. And on top of that, like, it's hard to justify, or it's hard to say, that if he went number one overall, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever. Wouldn't be surprised in the least. So Marvin Harrison is both of our consensus number ones, and
I think he should go number one. That's the thing. It's one of those things where it's like the quarterback value is going to override just how good he is.
Yeah.
And that's the crazy part, is because, like, if the Bears are at number one, I would take him number one. And whatever you do, you find the quarterback later, right? This class is really good at quarterbacks as well. And it's just like, I look at it and I go, he's such this is going to sound hyperbolic, and I think a lot of people are going to be like, oh, he's crazy. But I think he's the best wide receiver in the NFL the day he gets drafted.
Wow.
And it's just like, that's big shoes to fill and all that stuff. And Justin Jefferson is out of this world good. But, like, when I look at him, I just don't see how it doesn't work. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
He's got the pedigree. He's proven everything he could in college. He's like baby Devontae Adams. Like, I think he has the ability. He will have the ability in a very short turnaround to dominate at that level. Like I said, the guy, he's not the shiftiest, he's not the fastest, but he is just as smooth and as complete of a wide receiver as there is in this class.
Yeah, and it's just like, I think it's all of this stuff is like, it's good enough.
Yeah.
Right? He's not the fastest, but he runs a 4.340. He's clocked in at 4.39. So it's just like, that's fast enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's not the strongest, but he's strong enough. And it's the combination of everything that puts it to where I just go, yeah, I just don't see how this doesn't work at the NFL level.
Yeah. I'm going to go on to actually, he happens to be my, right now, if I had to, rank them, my number 2 wide receiver in this class, and that's LSU wide receiver Malik Neighbors. Prototypical. I mean, maybe a little shorter. Maybe Marvin Harrison has the prototypical size, but he possesses good size. He's 6 foot, about 200, 205 pounds. Just a really, really good smooth athlete. A guy, he can sink his hips. He creates separation on those intermediate routes. He's able to stop and go in various speed. A really, really elite, high level uh, route runner, and runs a variety of things, not just a hitch and a go guy. He's all over the field, full route tree. He's a natural hands catcher who can pluck the ball away. Doesn't use his frame to do it. Again, not overly explosive, but has enough shiftiness and wiggle in space that makes defenders miss. Um, I like what he's done this year. I see him emerging as a real, force, as a leader on that LSU team. He's got great character, high character player. He's confident. He's a competitor. I don't even think he's met his full potential yet. Like I said, even in terms of the run game, like, is he the biggest? Is he, is he an Alan Lazard type blocker? No, he's not, but he gives consistent effort and he's willing. He gets his nose in there to do whatever he can to affect a play in and play out. 100% all the time. Like I said, not the most explosive guy, but has that, that route running crispness, that understanding, that wherewithal, can settle and find the open spots and zones. Just really, really complete. And the guy I think is going to be a top 10 player when it's all said and done by the time April comes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that I think what you said all stands true for Neighbors. Is truly, I think, the best way to describe him quickly is elite athlete, because that's what he is.
Yeah.
He is an elite athlete, and crazy body control and all of that stuff, knows how to high point the ball. And that's the thing that I like about his game, is that, but at the beginning of his career, if you put him in the slot, he's smart enough to understand and know where the gaps and zones are and to operate in the middle of the field. Really good yards after the catch. Like the guy, I think right now is a top 10 pick. And that's where I think he ends up when things are all said and done.
Yeah, Neighbors, I don't know if he's prototypical XZ slot or whatever. I think he can move him all over the field and really play him against the matchups very well. I think, like I said, I think he's not even tapped into his top end potential. He's a guy that will get better. He's a guy that will get better as he gets into the pros.
And that's why I said, like the whole point is, I don't think at the NFL level he can be a consistent just like X guy.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what, like, you just move him around as he develops that skill set, because he's got to build a better tree to be a true, like, route tree to be a true X. And he's got to get better at the boundary to be a true X. But that doesn't mean, like, dude, just move him around. Take the matchup. If they're playing off, put him in the X, because he can handle that. And you know what? You want to put him in a bunch formation and have him cross in the middle of the field. He's so versatile. And that's what I like about Neighbors, is like, just... He's a really, like, I wasn't high on Neighbors coming into the year, and then he something flipped this year, and top 10 pick. I agree.
Yeah. So who do you got next? Who do you like next on your board?
So who do I like next? Number 3 is not who I'm actually saying here or who we're talking about on my board, because I think 1 and 2 for us goes very, very similarly. In Marvin Harrison and then Malik Neighbors. I'm going to let you talk about my number 3 pick on this board a little bit later in the video, because I want to talk about homegrown talent. And by homegrown, he's not actually from Florida, but he currently plays in my home state of Florida. Florida State wide receiver Keon Coleman. I love Keon Coleman. Right now, he's my number 4 wide receiver on my big board, on my list, right? And I just love what I see from Keon Coleman, right? The transfer out of Michigan to Florida State, Michigan State to Florida State, has worked in his favor exceptionally well. And it's crazy to think about. Another huge prospect that I get to talk about, right? 6'4", 215 pounds. And when I watch him on the field, there is one thing that continuously comes back to my head and you see that.
Mhm.
When you look at your guys who are 6'4", 215, what do you want them to be as a wide receiver? Strong, attack the ball in the air, catch it at its high point, box out DBs with their body, creating separation with their butts, and just being long and having really long catch radiuses. And that's everything that Keon Coleman is. Really, really good athlete, just elite size. And like, the thing that I love about it is you look at him and you don't immediately think 6'4", 215, right? He carries his weight exceptionally well, which just gives him a better ability to like, he can just control his body a lot better because the muscle mass is so compact. And that's what I love about him.
Yeah.
Another thing is like, when he's on the field, you can tell that he thinks that he is like, it's that I'm him mentality, that alpha dog mentality. You see that from him every time he gets the ball thrown at him. And it's almost become like automatic this year with him, where it's just like, in the red zone and I'm watching Florida State, I go, just throw to Coleman, because he's going to come down with it. He is a true contested catch merchant, and 50-50 balls aren't 50-50 balls when you go against Keon Coleman. They're like
Yeah.
70-30. He's going to come down with it way more often than he isn't. So I love that ability from him. Now, there are some holes in his game that he does need to fix. I'm not a big fan of how inconsistent he is in the run game. I think he needs to get better blocking and doing all of that stuff. I think he has a tendency to curl routes a little bit too much. And so I think he needs to crispen up his route running. But when you look at body control and all of the things that you want, the ability to high point the ball, go at it with his hands, all of those things, all of the basketball skills that he was able to learn, because a lot of people don't know this, at Michigan State, he played basketball at Michigan State freshman year. He brought all of those skills with him into football, and it just works really, really well for him. And so I love Keon Coleman as a prospect.
Yeah. See, you and I beg to differ in one aspect. Is I think Keon Coleman is pretty dominant in the run game and in his blocking. Like, he's just a physical presence at 6'4", so on and so forth. Not to mention, he also returns punts for Florida State, which is just shows the athlete that he is. And like you said, one on one, there's probably very few people in the country that can handle him one on one. Probably the best red zone threat in this entire class. Like, he's going to score touchdowns
Yep.
with relative ease if you give him a chance to get those big mitts on the ball. Like, I really like Coleman too. I know he's a little bit of an older prospect. I'm sorry, no, he's not. Coleman's only 21, I believe, or 21 or 22.
21.
21, yeah. So
And just to clear up real quick, when I mean the run game, I think right now in college, he's winning in the run game because he's just stronger than everybody that he faces.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that's going to continue to work in the NFL. I think technique in the run game is where I think he can fix some things with his hands. And like, I think he just wins because he's just stronger than people right now.
Yeah.
And I worry because, like, well, we all remember Arcega Whiteside, right? That's what he was doing to win before. How is that going to translate? Technique beats strength most times, and that's where I look at it.
Yeah. And listen, he's 10 times the athlete of JJ Arcega Whiteside, but yeah, like, listen, there's not a whole lot much to dislike in Keon Coleman's game. He's dominant. I think he's for sure a top half of the first round guy. And I have him currently number 4 on my board. And my number 3 guy is who I'm going to talk about next, who is slowly rising. And I wouldn't be surprised if, he makes it, right up there, right under Marvin Harrison when it's all said and done. And that's Washington receiver Rome Odunze. 6'3" and a half, 215 pounds. Just a true playmaker in every sense of the word, right? He's done it for the past 2 seasons in Washington. Um, Underrated athlete, underrated athleticism, super impressive hands, strong, smooth runner. Like I said, he gets in and out of breaks, separates good in the short and the intermediate stuff, and still can get by you, on the deep stuff. True, what I think is he's not only a deep threat. I think he can really play that possession X as well. He's got some work to do in regards to running the full route tree. He's not asked to do it a lot at Washington, but there's not too many wide receivers that I've watched play this year, not named Marvin Harrison, that I think that you really have to account for every single play other than Roma Dunze, right? Again, not an overly shifty guy, but super strong, big catch radius. Again, confident. He's got a repetitive play style. Like every play, he goes at it. He's got that mentality, that dog in him. And again, another guy, very high character, emerging leader, respected by his teammates, team captain. All that stuff just bodes well for him. Like I know comparisons are really, really hard, and really kind of, there's no real solid factual basis behind these comparisons. But when I look at him, I see AJ Brown. I see everything that AJ Brown is, and right now for what he was with Tennessee and what he is for the Philadelphia Eagles right now, I see Roma Dunze being able to develop.
I think the best word to describe, and I'm disappointed that I didn't say this with Coleman, I'll say it now with Odunze. I think the best way to describe these two guys is just raw. These guys got crazy upside, like because of just body build and profiles, but like Odunze isn't asked to win with a lot at Washington. And a big part of that comes because Michael Penix can just sling it, and he is quick enough, to just create enough separation with his body and to do those things. But when all things are said and done, I agree with what you said at the top of your talk about Rome Odunze, which is when all things are said and done and you can really start having these conversations about these players and breaking down their games and all of that stuff, I would not be surprised if in April Rome Odunze is the second name off of the in the wide receiver room is the second name taken. And it's not a dig on Neighbors, but there's just so much in the last 2 years that Odunze has done that I think evaluators are going to fall in love with.
Yep.
And I get why.
Yeah, and listen, he shows up. What I like about him is he shows up in the big spots. He's not afraid of the big spotlight. He doesn't cower to, the competition or so on and so forth. He's just like, he's a ball player. There's no doubt in my mind, barring any catastrophic issues at the combine or any injuries, God forbid, that he doesn't hear his name called in the first round. I mean, there's a couple locks. Rome Odunze is as big of a lock of a first round right now as there is.
I have him as a top 15 pick right now. I know that might be a little generous, but with how many wide receiver needy teams are at the top of the draft board right now, I don't know if a team is going to be able to look at him as a prospect and then pass up on him.
Yeah. Why don't you give me one more? Give me a little breakdown of another guy in your top 10.
Yeah, I think I want to talk about A.D. Mitchell. Again, another big-bodied receiver, and it kind of goes to show what I want the Jets to do with wide receivers this year, right? But Adonai Mitchell out of Texas, man. Texas has built up a really impressive program this year. And when all things are said and done, I would not be surprised if we heard, depending on what happens with Quinn Ewers, 3 Texas players taken in the top 50 of this draft, just because, again, a lot of Longhorns are going to be drafted this year.
Yeah, that offense they have there is ridiculous, man.
Yep. And again, a lot of those guys are going to go to the next level, and a lot of those guys are going to be successful in the next level. And I think that Mitchell is one of those guys who can come out. I look at it as I have a bottom of the first grade on him right now. So not as high as your Keon Coleman's, your Romo Dunze's, your Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, obviously. But if you're a team picking, 24 to 32, and you want the fifth year on a guy who's going to have, a contested catch ability and be a red zone target and is just big and strong, like some of these other wide receivers in this class, AD Mitchell is an excellent way to kind of go about that. And that's the thing. Again, another player with a basketball background. You can see that when he's playing out there,
Yeah.
Really good at going up and getting the ball. He's a violent runner. That's the one thing I actually like about AD Mitchell, is that he is so good at catching the ball and then turning upfield and like getting yards after the catch. With his size and, let's be real, lack of speed, because he doesn't have a game-breaking speed. I believe he runs a 4.5. To be able to still be a successful yards after the catch guy based purely on, your ability to understand coverages and how to make men miss in the open field. I love that ability from him. I actually think his game at the line of scrimmage is really good as well, making guys miss, hand fighting, and just kind of beating the guy off of the line. He doesn't tend to get jammed all that much,
Yeah.
but I just love what I see from Mitchell. I would love for him to work better underneath, and really get a better skill set of when he's facing the quarterback and being more of a weapon that way underneath and all of that stuff. I don't necessarily love how he's going about catching his deep balls. I want to see him using his hands more on that aspect. But like, again, in college, he doesn't have to do those things because he's just stronger than the DB. So I don't know how much of that is just, he's not going to do anything, so I can just, create the pillow and catch it. But I love what you get out of AD Mitchell. He is a great contested catch guy. I continue to see the matchup and the made in heaven of Kansas City with AD Mitchell on that team, because they've got a ton of small, fast, shifty receivers, and they got the big body in Travis Kelce. Go give them a red zone target in AD Mitchell, and that's exactly what he is, right? Go tell him to beat the corner one-on-one, beat a corner one-on-one to the corner, and I think he can do it. And you just throw it up to him, and he'll come down with it most of the time. Again, another contested catch guy in this class, and there's a lot of those guys in this class, and I love it.
Yeah, he plays well vertically. Like I said, he goes up and he high points very well, can get the ball. My thing with Mitchell, and I don't necessarily have him as a lock in the first round. I don't know if he's there. Probably top 50 right now. Again, things are going to change between now and April, but there's just, overall lack of production. He was in Georgia, missed a bunch of games for injuries and so on and so forth. So he hasn't really put it out on tape. He's one of those guys that's going to need to test very, very well to lock himself in to that first round. But, I love that idea of that fit in Kansas City. Put him out on the boundary, and you put Rashee Rice in the Z and whoever you want in the slot. And with Kelce, you have four guys out there from Mahomes to take his pick.
And that's the whole point, right? That's why I said KC, because it's the bottom of the first. That's pick 31 or 32, depending on who you ask, right? And that's exactly what I said. Don't forget, they have Sky Moore. They can put Sky Moore in the slot. Like, they've got so many of those shifty, quick, you know what, we're just going to make a guy, but they don't got a big body target. They thought that maybe, they could get that out of Valdez Scantling, and it just isn't working. You know what? Get younger in the wide receiver room. AD Mitchell is the guy that can do that. Again, another contested guy in this draft class.
Yeah, and I'm gonna finish up here. The last guy I'm gonna talk about is a little bit different. A name we all known but different. Cut from a different cloth, if you will, from the five guys that we talked about, and that's Emeka Egbuka. primarily a slot. Probably the best route runner in this class, probably the best, smoothest yards after catch, dangerous, legitimately dangerous after the catch. Real good, exceptional burst, elusive in space. He can stop and start. He's got that flexion in his ankles, and he can lower his hips and drive. He can stop and start and cut on a dime. Again, separates at all levels, short routes, intermediate, can separates with speed, deep. Um, there's not a lot. Like I said, I wasn't very high on him, but the more I've really focused in and honed in on his film from the games that I watched from this year and last year, the more I see an NFL caliber, high end NFL caliber wide receiver. Now, granted, maybe he just finds his home in the slot and that's what he is. He definitely needs to get stronger. But those guys from Ohio State, they can come out and they can play ball in the NFL. We know that, right? Especially as Jets fans, we see what Garrett
Oh yeah.
Wilson can do. Chris Olave, what he can do. Again, already shows a real savvy style on the field. His IQ, his football IQ is really high. He's got reliable hands, not a body catcher, goes out and plucks the ball, adjusts his body well to off targets, and can really get to that top gear very fast. Like I said, we were talking off camera before. It wouldn't surprise me if Emeka was the one of the best wide receivers when all said and done in the NFL out of this class, right? It wouldn't surprise me at all if he elevates to someone like Jamar Chase. And those are big shoes to fill, and I know that's a big expectation, but that's the kind of player that I think Emeka Buka can be.
Yeah, it was really interesting when we were talking at the beginning of the show about players. There's like, oh my God, how is this person not on my list? That's exactly what I was talking about, was Ibuka. And it's a guy where, again, you can see a little bit of the bias on what I want Jets receivers, because I have, some of the bigger bodied guys in front of him. But when all things are said and done, I would not be surprised if Ibuka, if he goes to the right place and gets a good workload, if these quarterbacks don't ball out, he might be in that offensive rookie of the year conversation, because I think what you said, one thing that translates to the NFL so well is route running. Mm-hmm. If you are a good route runner, you will get open in the NFL. And if you get open, you should get the ball. And I think that's one thing that you can't take away from him is, man, can he run a crispy clean route? Just it's so precise and perfect, and I love that from him. When he's not the strongest, he's not the fastest, he's not the shiftiest, but he's crisp in his route running. And I said it earlier today, technique wins above all.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
He's a technician.
Yeah, for sure. Why don't you just shoot a couple other names that we didn't talk about, Tigo, that are on this list? We don't have to dive in too deep. Like I said, we threw six good solid reports out there for 6 of the guys that easily could be first rounders. I'm not guaranteeing all 6 of them will, but as of right now, I think you could peg them as first rounders. Who else do you like out there that almost made the cut for you?
One guy that almost made the cut, I almost did talk about him, was Mitchell's teammate, Worthy. Xavier Worthy is, oh man, just a burner, man. Just fast and strong, and would not be surprised if he runs sub 4.3 at the draft. I love him. One of my favorite wide receivers, just because it's so weird to see this combo working in as a wide receiver. He might transition to a tight end at the next level. Who knows? Johnny Wilson out of Florida State. Yeah. I love him. Not in my top 10 yet, but I love him. But one guy that I want people, I'm just going to put his name out there. A lot of people don't have him graded as highly as I have him at number 10 on my list right now. And that's Brian Thompson Jr. out of LSU. Malik Neighbors at LSU gets all of the love. And rightfully so.
Thomas, not Thompson.
Did I say Thompson again?
You
Sorry.
did.
Brian Thomas
Yeah.
Jr. I have not slept in 3 months. Brian Thomas Jr. leads the country in touchdowns with 13 right now.
Yeah.
He has 900 yards this year, 300 of which came after the catch. He's a contested catch guy. He's gotten targeted 6 times in contest, brought down 60% of them. The guy just scores touchdowns.
Yeah.
Another wide receiver, 6'4", 205. If you're getting a trend this year in wide receivers that I like, yeah, there is something. But boy, he's not getting the love that he deserves because he's on the opposite side of Neighbors, and it's hard to get that level of attention. It's the same thing that's happening with Ibuka this year. If Ibuka didn't have the fact that Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best prospect I've ever graded ever, you know, he would be getting a higher workload. He might be higher up on boards. Another player was like Rashawn Johnson last year. If he didn't have to run behind Bijan, he might have been a second or a third, like a much higher draft pick. He is unfortunately a product of the place that he like his draft grade is a product of the fact that he's at LSU and Neighbors is there. But man, I really, really, really like this kid. When LSU needs to score in the red zone, they're going towards him. 13 touchdowns, leads the nation ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr., who has 12 on the year. And I love what I'm seeing from his just ability overall. So that's one name I'm going to tell people to watch out for.
Yeah, those are two guys that I like as well. And two of the names I'm going to throw out there, again, we seem to have been honed in on different types of receivers. But two names that I'm going to throw out there that are I'm probably higher on than most right now is Troy Franklin out of Oregon being one. I mean, just ridiculous speed. I love what he does. He doesn't drop the ball ever. I think as in a career, I think he's just under 3% drop rate. Just a ball player, super fast, needs to get stronger, needs to put on a little bit weight at 6 foot, whatever it is, 6'2". He's only about 180 pounds. So he definitely needs to add some muscle onto the frame, but man, ball in his hand, he's dangerous, and he will run right by you. So Troy Franklin's one guy I like, and another guy is a smaller school guy, a MAC guy, Malachi Corley. He's been gaining a lot of buzz recently, and I was intrigued. So I went and I drew up some film on him, and man, let me tell you, I don't know if he stays as a wide receiver in the next level, but he's one of those guys like, when high school players get drafted and they don't know exactly where they're going to be and they get drafted or slotted as an athlete. That's Corley to an extent. I mean,
Yep.
he similar to Deebo Samuel, similar to Antonio Gibson, can take the ball out of the backfield, force, missed, he forces missed tackles as good as any running back in the country. He can, he's a gadget guy. He can get out there. He can run routes. He's got a diverse, and not the most diverse, but he can hit all the route trees, all the stems. He's just a freak athlete, man. And he's a guy that I definitely think is lining up to be an easy day 2 pick, and a guy that maybe not a lot of people are on because he plays in the MAC and he plays at Western Kentucky, but he's going to be one of those guys that becomes one of those draft day darlings that people are going to fall in love with once they really watch what he can do. He's just a unique talent, at the wide receiver position.
Do you think, just because I was going to use this as an example for Thompson, Jesus, it's gonna infuriate me. Thomas, do you think he has that? Do you remember the Christian Watson draft?
Yeah.
And how remember he was like a 3rd round pick when the whole process started, and then people started watching NDSU tape, and they were like, "Oh wait, this kid's got it." And then the Senior Bowl happens, and then whoa, he's really got it. And then he ends up as a top of the second kind of guy.
Yeah.
I look at Thomas as a guy who's going to have a similar trajectory in my eyes. I would
Yeah.
not be surprised if once the process starts and he starts getting these invites to these bowls and we start seeing the process go on, you see him skyrocket up boards. Not first round, I'm not putting him there, but as a guy that's going to go, in my opinion, in like the second round, as someone who I'm not going to sit here and lie to you, I've not watched really anything on Malachi Corley. You think he might have a very similar like trajectory where he can kind of like bump up into that second round and someone just say, yo, athlete, we'll figure it out later?
Yeah. I mean, I think he easily could. I think he has that. He's going to be a high RAS guy, and I think the versatility that he displays and what he can offer, and people see how guys like Debo Samuel, how Anquan Bolden, what that kind of game could do at the next level, and Malachi Corley fits in right in there. So yeah, I think he's a guy that's just, the trajectory is pointing up easily. So, listen, we're, we're pushing on, time limits here. So why don't we call it there? We got plenty of time to get into plenty more prospects and more positional groups. But real quick, Tigo, why don't you let everyone know where they can catch you?
Yeah, so it's Talking Jets with Tigo. We do Jets content over there, and all that stuff, and Jets with Tigo on X. So yeah, give me a follow. Hit the sub button while you're at it.
Yeah. And if you don't know, you can always catch me on YouTube here at Project Prospect with Dom C. Please like and subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. It helps the algorithm a lot. We're going to keep putting out content, from now until this draft cycle is done through April. You can catch me on Twitter as well at DC_NY Jets. And until the next time, for Tigo and myself, these are the Draft Dodgers. We'll talk to you later.